Welcome to the FedRAMP online training series. I'm Jason Oxenhandler, your instructor for this training. In this course, we're going to talk about the Security Assessment Plan, or SAP. The FedRAMP PMO developed this training series to help FedRAMP CSP applicants properly prepare for a FedRAMP assessment by providing a deeper understanding of the program and the level of effort required to satisfactorily complete a FedRAMP assessment. This training module is tailored to a CSP going through the JAB path and using a third-party assessment organization, or a 3PAO. By providing insight into what to expect when going through the FedRAMP assessment process, we want to ensure CSPs have the knowledge and resources to successfully achieve FedRAMP authorization. At the conclusion of this training session, you should understand the relationship between the SAP and the FedRAMP Security Assessment Framework, the role of the 3PAO in the assessment process, how to write each section of the SAP, specific assessment methods, and what the FedRAMP PMO is looking for when reviewing a SAP. Federal agencies are required to assess and authorize information systems in accordance with FISMA. The FedRAMP Security Assessment Framework, or SAF, is compliant with FISMA and is based on NIST's RMF, Risk Management Framework. In fact, FedRAMP uses the same documents and deliverables that NIST requires agencies to use. However, FedRAMP simplifies the NIST RMF by creating 4 process areas that encompass the 6 steps within 837 Revision 1: document, assess, authorize, and monitor. In this training module, we're going to focus on the assess phase of the SAF, which includes SAP documentation and testing. In the assess phase, CSPs must use an independent assessor, or a 3PAO, to test the information system to demonstrate that the controls are effective and implemented as documented in the SSP. This assessment starts with documenting the methodology and process for testing the control implementation in the SAP. The 3PAO will execute testing against the SAP using appropriate assessment procedures to determine the extent to which the controls are meeting the security requirements for the system. The results of this testing and recommendations are for mitigating risk, and they're documented in the Security Assessment Report, or the SAR. Accredited 3PAOs play a critical role in the FedRAMP security assessment process. Accredited 3PAOs have demonstrated independence and technical competency required to test the security implementations and collect representative evidence. The resulting Security Assessment Report, or SAR, and the supporting evidence make up a key requirement for leveraging agencies to use FedRAMP security assessment packages. The accreditation process for 3PAOs is governed by the American Association for Laboratory Accreditation, or A2LA. It's based on the concept of conformity assessment, a methodology to demonstrate capability in meeting requirements relating to a product, process, system, person, or body. For FedRAMP, the conformity assessment ensures that accredited 3PAOs consistently perform security assessments with the appropriate level of rigor and independence. Accredited 3PAOs are required to meet FedRAMP requirements for technical FISMA competence through demonstrated expertise in assessing cloud-based solutions. In the FedRAMP security assessment process, once the SSP has been approved, the 3PAO begins working with the CSP. The 3PAO performs and independently tests the CSP system to determine the effectiveness of the security control implementation. The role of the 3PAO within FedRAMP is to perform initial and periodic assessments of the CSP's security controls, audit control implementation, vulnerability and penetration testing, and validate and attest to the CSP's compliance with FedRAMP and FISMA requirements by creating a security assessment plan, including a plan for penetration testing, creating a security assessment report, including all artifacts and evidence collected, and to provide a consistently high level of rigor in the assessment. In addition, they must maintain compliance with FedRAMP 3PAO requirements for independence and technical competence. Security assessments are complex activities because of organizational requirements, the amount and type of systems, the technical techniques used, and the logistics. Security assessments can be simplified and associated risks reduced through an established, repeatable planning process. The SAP, or Security Assessment Plan, helps by ensuring that testing activities are clearly documented. In the FedRAMP process, the 3PAO creates a testing plan using the FedRAMP Security Assessment Plan template. The SAP template assists with providing the right level of detail to properly prepare for testing and documents the following: activities planned for an assessment and the rules and boundaries for assessors. It identifies the systems and networks being assessed, the type and level of testing permitted, logistical details, and data handling requirements. The document also identifies all the assets within the scope of the assessment, including components such as hardware, software, and physical facilities. It also provides a roadmap and methodology for execution of the tests and indicates that the 3PAO will use the FedRAMP associated security test cases that are provided in the form of worksheets. The FedRAMP ISSO reviews and approves the SAP to ensure that the assessment will cover the stated authorization boundary and controls. Once the SAP has been reviewed, the JAB approves the SAP, and then the 3PAO performs an assessment of the CSP's controls in accordance with the SAP. The SAP is divided into 6 primary sections and 4 appendices. We will discuss each one in depth in the upcoming segments to highlight key focus areas. The sections that note the scope and assumptions of the assessment further identify the cloud system, detail key system attributes, and help set up the testing parameters. It's important here to solidify the testing scope, solidify the control selection, and clearly define the testing boundary, which should match the boundary defined in the SSP. When completing the scope section, the 3PAO should be clear and consistent in naming conventions for system identifiers and be sure to note any references to other documents or dependencies. Now, the scope specifically asks the 3PAO to identify and list the following system attributes: the physical locations of all the different components to be tested, IP addresses and network ranges, the various web-based applications that make up the system, and the logins and their associated roles, databases slated for testing, and functions and roles that will be tested. For the assumptions section, the 3PAO must list assumptions for each unique engagement. Assumptions may vary from assessment to assessment, but should take into consideration the following: dependencies on resources, including documentation, and individuals with knowledge of the system's infrastructure, appropriate login account information and credentials, access to hardware, software, systems, and networks defined within the scope, processes for testing security controls that have been identified as not applicable, and situational testing of significant upgrades or changes to the infrastructure or components of the system. Within the SAP, FedRAMP provides a documented methodology to describe the process for testing the security controls. Independent assessors, or 3PAOs, may add to this section. However, templates cannot be tampered with. Recommended test procedures are provided by the FedRAMP PMO in the Revision 4 Test Case Workbook. This workbook contains the procedures and methodology for testing based on NIST SP 853A Revision 4. 3PAOs use this workbook to test baseline controls and enhancements per required test procedures and document any control deficiencies and findings. The 3PAO needs to address all controls and requirements and document the results to a level of detail that the test can be replicated by another tester at another time. Assessment methods define the nature of the assessor actions and include examine, interview, and test. Let's start with examine. This method is reviewing, inspecting, observing, studying, or analyzing one or more assessment objectives. For example, safeguards and countermeasures, backup operations, monitoring activities, and contingency plans, just to name a few. The purpose of this method is to gain understanding, clarification, or evidence. Next, let's move on to interview. This method involves holding discussions with individual stakeholders or groups to gain understanding, clarification, or evidence. Now the test method. This method is exercising system components under specific conditions to compare actual results with expected behavior using automated and manual methods. Assessment methods should have a set of associated attributes, either depth or coverage, which helps define rigor and scope of the assessment. The test plan section of the SAP focuses on the execution of testing. How is the 3PAO going to test the cloud system? Who are they going to talk to? What tools are they going to use? Security control assessors play a unique role in testing system security controls because they're responsible for validating that controls are implemented correctly, operating as intended, and producing the desired outcome with respect to meeting the security requirements for the system. In this section, the 3PAO must obtain at least 3 points of contact from the CSP to use for testing communications. One of the contacts must be available 24/7 and must include an operations center, for example, a NOC or a SOC. The key here is to be sure that each POC role and function in the assessment is clearly defined. You'll also find a description of what tools will be used for testing security controls, including all product names, names of open source tools, and version numbers. If open source tools are used, name the organization or the individuals that develop the tools and the function and purpose of the tool. For example, file integrity checking, web application scanning. Now for scanners, you need to indicate what the scanner's capability is. For example, database scanning, web app scanning, infrastructure scanning, or code scanning and analysis. Next are the technical tests that will be performed through manual methods. That's without the use of automated tools. The results of all manual tests must be recorded in the SAR. Examples are listed in the first 4 rows. Delete those examples and put in the real tests. Add additional rows as necessary. Identifiers must be in the format MT-1, MT-2, which would indicate manual test 1 and manual test 2, and so on and so forth. Automated tools and manual test methods planned for penetration testing are included in these tables and in the penetration test plan. After that, insert the security assessment testing schedule. The schedule should allow time to resolve findings and correct weaknesses. The 3PAO also has to indicate what type of sampling will be implemented for both technical controls and management controls. Sampling of technical testing of system components may be defined in some cases. For example, systems with thousands of components. Sampling of management and operational controls is always defined. For example, a minimum of 3 interviewees, 3 document reviews, etc. There are several of these types of tests where sampling is performed, and the 3PAO must indicate how they intend to do that. Now let's talk about the rules of engagement. This is a document designed to describe proper notifications and disclosures between the owner of a tested system and a 3PAO. In particular, an ROE includes information about the targets of automated scans and IP address origination information of automated scans and other testing tools. Together with the information provided in preceding sections of this document, the document serves as a rules of engagement once it's signed. You're free to edit and modify the disclosures of this section as necessary. If testing is to be conducted from an internal location, identify at least one network port with access to all subnets or segments to be tested. The purpose of identifying the IP addresses is to help the CSP understand that the rapid and high-volume network traffic is not an attack and is part of testing. 3PAOs must identify specific activities included and not included in the testing of each unique system. Show your work. The appendices give you that opportunity to provide any supporting information that further tells the story of how the 3PAO plans to test the cloud system. Supporting appendices provide detailed assessment-related information, including general references, definitions, terms, and acronyms, even though this section is pre-populated with information already contained in the SAP. The 3PAO is expected to add further information that is unique to the cloud system being tested. Test case scenarios. Results of the security test case procedures should be recorded directly in each respective Rev 4 test case workbook. Details regarding the penetration testing plan and methodology. It's important to note that FedRAMP has issued guidance around penetration testing, and that document can be found at our website, fedramp.gov, and by clicking on the Resources tab at the top part of this module. However, the penetration test plan must include an actual testing of all the attack vectors, a description of the approach, constraints, and methodologies for each planned attack, a detailed pen test schedule that specifies the start and end dates and times, and the content of each test period. And lastly, technical POCs with a backup for each subsystem or application that may be included in the penetration test. And finally, Appendix D allows you to provide other reference documentation, including penetration testing rules of engagement, penetration testing methodology, and the sampling methodology used in testing. All SAPs are subject to FedRAMP review. When the SAP has been reviewed by the CSP, has been satisfactorily documented by FedRAMP and CSP standards, and is ready for submission, the 3PAO should post the document in MAX and notify the FedRAMP ISSO that the document has been submitted. Once FedRAMP receives the SAP, the document will pass through an initial and detailed review to check the document for quality and content. The initial review will validate the document against FedRAMP standards for completeness and for showstoppers. Checks are also made for common problems and critical controls. The majority of the initial review will check for completeness. The FedRAMP PMO is specifically looking to check if all sections and tables of the SAP are populated with relevant information and if that information is complete. For example, one of the checks the PMO looks for is to see if all required attachments are provided. Are the penetration test plan, the assessment test cases, and rules of engagement attached? The detailed review will go further, and many of the checks will focus on verification of information to ensure consistency with the SSP, but also to confirm that the testing plans are clear and appropriate for the system. As we walk through the following sections of the SAP, we will highlight key checks and tips for writing to each section and table. Section 1.3. Does the system overview information match the information in the SSP? Excerpts from the system information from the SSP need to be included and must be consistent. Table 2.1. Does the information in this document match Table 1-1 in the SSP? Table 2-2. Does information include all locations listed in the SSP? If all the locations are not listed, then the criteria or rationale for selection of the locations or sampling methodology must be clearly described. Table 2-3. Does this table include IP addresses for the complete inventory? This inventory needs to match the inventory in the SSP. This may be a separate file versus using the table in the SAP. Now, table headers should not be changed. If all the inventory items are not listed, then the criteria or rationale for selection of the locations or sampling methodology must be clearly described. Table 2-4. Does this table include all web applications URLs for the complete inventory? This inventory needs to match the inventory in the SSP. This may be a separate file versus using the table in the SAP. If all the inventory items are not listed, then the criteria or rationale for the selection of the locations must be clearly described. Table 2-5. Does this table include all database applications for the complete inventory? As with tables 2-3 and 2-4, this inventory needs to match the inventory in the SSP. Table 2-6 are functions for each of the roles defined in enough detail to determine the testing that will be done. This is part of ensuring the testing methodology is being tailored for this specific system and that separation of duties or roles and privilege escalation will be tested. This information can be found in this section or in the penetration test plan. Section 3. Have any assumptions been changed, deleted, or added? Assumptions may need to be tailored to the system being tested. Ensure that these changes do not degrade or negatively impact the purpose, completeness, and integrity of the testing. The methodology. Is there a complete and detailed description of the testing methodology for this specific system? If there are alternative controls, review the methodology to determine if the implementation of those controls impacts the testing methodology. Is the methodology detailed in this section consistent with the assumptions in Section 3 and the testing detailed in the rules of engagement? Ensure consistency across the various sections in the document that describe the testing methodologies for this system. Does the methodology provide detail on sampling of non-technical controls, such as management controls? There should be an indication in this section or Appendix B, test cases, on what is considered an agreed upon sample for examination of items like the executed rules of behavior or training records. Table 5-1. Does the role description provide information about what the tester will actually be doing? For example, penetration testing or vulnerability scanning. Check to see if they have quality control identified. If not, suggest they identify this role as well. Table 5-2. Does the role description provide information about what the CSP POC will be doing for these tests? The role as defined in the user types may also be applicable. Table 5-3. Does the list of tools include a detailed description of what the tools will be used to test within the system? For example, Nessus will be used to scan OS and database applications for vulnerabilities. It is not sufficient to indicate that Nessus is a vulnerability scanner. Table 5-3. Does the list of tools include tools that will be utilized as part of penetration testing? It's okay to include these here and include that detailed information. The information here must be consistent with the penetration testing plan. Table 5-4. Does this table include manual tests that may be required for items that cannot be tested using automated tools? This might include manual tests of the firewall configuration rules, for example. The PMO will also verify with the CSP and 3PAO that the tools selected for routine continuous monitoring of the OS, web, and database vulnerability scans that are listed in this table will be the tools used for continuous monitoring. This is required. The 3PAO may use additional tools to verify tests, for example, but the CSP must be able to continue to manage initial and future findings using the same tool. Table 5-5. Does the schedule match the ISSO project schedule? Resolve any inconsistencies to ensure the project schedule is maintained. The PMO will also review Section 6 and the appendix attachments, as well as for verification and adequacy of the rules of engagement, test cases, and the penetration testing plans. Thanks for joining us for this training session. I'm Jason Oxenhendler, and we'll see you next time.